you so much, and thanks for mentioning cybersecurity as part of the energy security threat, not only to delivery systems like the grid, but also to production facilities as well. Have to keep that in mind. For the record, I'm truly an all-the-above energy guy. I like wind and solar. I fully support countries like Uruguay and Peru and Chile that are going for more renewables. We visited on a CODEL to Chile recently, a $200 million investment in a solar facility just out of Santiago. And so truly like to see the private investment in those areas. But when I was at the Summit of the Americas last year, before I went to the Summit of the Americas, we talked about a lot about North American, or really American energy independence and North American energy independence, working with our allies to the north and south, Canada with Keystone Pipeline and their oil fields, but also with Mexico, the expansion of natural gas pipelines from the Eagle Ford Shale into Mexico, denationalization of Pemex, and other things that were going on in North America. But then in conversations at the summit, we really started thinking more broadly about the Western Hemisphere and thinking about hemispheric energy independence, thinking about LNG exports, thinking about the Panama Canal, thinking about the pipelines that could supply natural gas from the U.S. to Central American countries. That could be a game changer for quality of life. And when I think about renewables, I think about energy. I also think about 24/7 baseload power, always on, always available, that you don't get from some intermittent sources. Proven sources are fossil fuels, oil and gas that work to provide transportation fuels, but also for electricity. In addition, we always think about hydroelectricity as being a prevalent source of energy. But what we see in Venezuela, due to the El Nino and weather patterns that have changed and a drought, low water levels, they're having to ration electricity due to the hydroelectric dam not having water levels necessary to provide electricity in Venezuela. So there are a lot of dynamics and moving pieces with regard to energy security in the hemisphere. I do know this, that a robust U.S. Energy renaissance, due to the Bakken formation, due to expansion in the Gulf of Mexico and other energy sources, new technologies, the impact of hydraulic fracturing and its impact on the natural gas production has led to the United States' ability to export a lot of natural gas and possibly export oil. Congress lifting the decades-long oil export ban could make and was poised to make the United States a bigger player in the energy markets globally. But then we see OPEC, the information I provided earlier, really increasing global supply of oil and the impact that it has not only on U.S. producers. I mentioned earlier, 100 bankruptcies in the energy sector, 150,000 layoffs, reduction in investment in the energy sector was mentioned earlier. But think about those OPEC policies and their impact on countries like Venezuela and the Maduro government that does not have the revenues now to artificially prop up the socialist government and provide a lot of things to the citizens of Venezuela. The Venezuelans are the one that's hurting. I think we'll look back at OPEC's decision as possibly being a game changer in a positive way for Venezuela, my hopes anyway, in regime change there to lead to more democracy, more popular involvement in government, and more democratic principles applied in reality, not just on paper. So I hope that we'll look back and see that. So, Mr. Hochstein, we talked about North American energy independence. You heard all that I said. How can North American governments work better together to promote the energy resources we have? We know what Mexico and the U.S. are doing in the Eagle Ford and just south of Mr. Castro's district. We know what Canada and the U.S. have historically done and want to do with bringing Canadian oil to the refining capacity that we have in the U.S. We know we've lifted the decades-long oil export ban. We know that hydraulic fracturing has led to an expansion of natural gas so that we can export LNG. We know that we are trying to do all we can to expedite the permitting for LNG terminals so that we can be ready to export that. We know the Caribbean as well as European countries are wanting U.S. gas. What can we do more to make sure that the U.S. plays a part in energy stability, is what I'm going to call it, within the Caribbean, but also in the Western Hemisphere region? And I'll let you answer.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. I spent a considerable amount of time thinking and working on this issue. I think that the way you described it correctly, it's about the stability and security of the region, which is why we called it in 2014, when oil prices were at $100, the Caribbean Energy Security Initiative. And it's about looking at just in our hemisphere. In the Caribbean, you have islands that are dependent on fuel oil from Venezuela, where the dependency is not really on the oil. You can replace the oil with a different supplier. But the Petrocaribe scheme has indebted them, and through some additional aspects of corruption, has made an untenable situation for most of these countries to be able to sustain their economies long-term with this kind of debt structure. And we saw recently, you were in Paraguay recently, where Petrocaribe Venezuela tried to call the debt on Paraguay as a political leverage. So we have to get away from that paradigm. And we're in an era where I think that you're right, that we have to have a mix, whether it's some renewables and natural gas. But none of that has been taken advantage of. And if you look at the case that you mentioned in Jamaica, where it's been renewables and natural gas, we're starting to see a real change in what we can do. And the leadership of the United States is necessary not only in the permitting process, but the innovation on the corporate side, on the private sector, in addressing the smaller scale capability to deliver gas, LNG, from the United States to the Caribbean islands is advancing very quickly. We're now talking about companies putting barges as a floating gas terminal so that you lower both the cost and the ability to, for the scale size of it. The first LNG cooperation between the United States and Jamaica started because an American company met with the Jamaican Prime Minister at the first Caribbean Energy Security Summit last year, a year and a half ago. They met there, and we encouraged it through there. We have to expand that, but we have to do it we can't be the sole answer. It cannot be just about the United States. We have to bring in Canada and Mexico and the EU and other member states from the EU individually that will support us both financially in working with the IDB and the World Bank and others to create the kind of financial environment that will allow investment. We have a problem. We can find solutions to the energy security in the Caribbean. But as long as you don't have a regulatory environment, a legal structure that American companies can trust, you're not going to have the investment no matter what the price of gas is, no matter what the price of renewables are. So we have
about the rule of law, legal structure in the countries in the Caribbean and also in other Latin American countries that would make American companies feel comfortable doing business there. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Let me ask you, and in the essence of time, you mentioned Argentina. So the Macri government is very interested in expanding the bountiful resources in Argentina. When we were in Chile and Argentina on the same codel, there's a gas pipeline that runs from Argentina to Chile. It was once used to export natural gas from Argentina to Chile. Now it's used to import natural gas from Chile, and that doesn't make the Argentine people very happy. They want to be an exporter. So the Macri government wants to really start exploring and exploiting the natural resources to make Argentina a player once again. How does he do that? How does he attract that investment at $30 to $50 a barrel oil? And what is the price point that will make it attractive for foreign investment in Argentina?
So again, I think what we're seeing is that putting together good governance and good tenders that are supportive, the kind of terms that would be supportive of investment have already been successful. And American companies, international companies are coming to Argentina. Our teams have already been down to Argentina. I'll be there in a couple of weeks. They have tremendous unconventional shale gas potential, some of the best that we've seen in the world. We'd like to be supportive of them, looking at how to develop that, bringing in the kind of companies that would be able to support them. So I think their production can rise in natural gas, while at the same time looking at other power solutions in the power sector. But it's not only there. We're seeing that by bringing the cost down of LNG and of floating storage and regasification units, so FSRUs, and the concept of a floating terminal, we're seeing that throughout Central America and South America. So Colombia is going to have a floating terminal. Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, all are talking about how do you utilize floating terminals while also interconnecting pipelines. So you talked about, sir, the interconnection between the United States, the Eagle Ford with Mexico. But if we can also have an interconnection with from Mexico to Guatemala of natural gas, right, that will allow for bringing, essentially interconnecting the American market all the way down to Mexico and from Mexico down to Guatemala, and you're starting to see us develop a broader market that can support their economies while also bringing down costs by broadening the base of what the sector.
It'd be a huge game changer for the quality of life in some of these third world countries. Mexican gas coming from the north, LNG coming from the Panama Canal as a distribution hub going north and south could be a game changer for some of those countries, and I truly believe it. Thanks for mentioning that. I'm out of time. I'm going to yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Well, thank